Okay, Chevre, ladies and gents, boys and girls, welcome to the greatest show on earth. It's the weekly Torah portion class. This week is a Parshas Vayigash. So it's not going to really be a question and answer class, but sometimes we take a topic from the Parsha and we ask a question about it, and we dissect it, and then we apply it to our daily life. This is not going to be that class. You guys have a lot of hangover. Your brains are still a little foggy. So
My brain has been foggy for a while.
The donuts also.
Donuts, right?
Just saying.
I hear too many l'chaims over 8 days of Hanukkah, right? 8 days of l'chaim, so we'll...
No, nobody's complaining about
no
it.
one's complaining. I say it's a complaint, but it's a fact. Okay, let's get into it. So the premise of the class is, if you're normal, that's a bad word. If you're regular, and I don't mean your bowels. I mean, if you're regular, then and you are observant of any one of the mitzvahs, you run into a problem. And the problem is that sometimes you're just not in the mood. And every person goes into this. And if they tell you they don't deal with this, they're lying. Then they're not being truthful. Only, it explains in Tanya, right? Only the righteous people, they wake up in the morning pumped up to do a mitzvah. What was it? I don't know. I didn't turn on the heat in my house. The truth is, the upstairs air conditioner doesn't have heater. So it was 63 degrees, 64 degrees upstairs yesterday or the day before. They get up in the morning to go learn.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't...
We had heater and it was on and I didn't want to get out.
I know. I know. We had meetings in the morning. I know. So the question is, how do you deal with it? Is there a reservoir that you can tap into to give us the strength? I was listening to an interview, I think it was with John McEnroe. John, right? John McEnroe. And he was talking. Yeah, and I think he just released a book or something. So the NPR was interviewing him, and he played the other board. What's his name?
Bjorn Borg.
Yeah, right. And he said that they had this unbelievable match, and he beat him like in the fourth set, and that's it. He thought, that's it, I have him. And then he said this Borg, they dug deep and came up with more energy, and somehow he couldn't believe it, and he realized that there's another level they can go to. So to apply it, because with me everything goes through sports, right?
Okay with me.
Yes, to apply it in our everyday life. The question that we're going to deal with in today's class is, what reservoir? How do we dig deep when we're not in the mood of doing a mitzvah? How do we get the energy to do it? Any of you guys want to share what you guys do personally, or the answer is I just stay in bed.
Sometimes I stay in bed.
Okay, yeah.
Sometimes I don't get to it at the proper time.
That's
Get
one.
to it.
You get around to it.
I get around to it.
I was home earlier, and on one of the entrance tables in my house, I see a package of lettuce. So I asked my wife, I said, well, what's with this lettuce? She said, one of my girls, we're being recorded, I'm not going to say which one, went shopping last night, and she put it down. So I asked her, so what happened? Oh, I was going to put it in the fridge. Thank you. Right? I was getting to it.
See, I have a better excuse. I forgot where I put it, and I just discovered it.
Here you go. Okay. So this week's Parsha, after the brothers meet Yosef, and this is the end of the whole saga, where the brothers don't know who Yosef is, and Yosef is going to take Binyamin as prisoner for stealing the cup, and then he finally reveals himself as the brother, and then he tells them, guys, I know because there's 7 years of famine, we had 7 years of plenty, there's going to be 7 years of famine, I'm going to take care of you, right? And then, so the first half of the Parsha talks about Yosef and his brothers reuniting. Then the second half, or the end of the Parsha, sort of goes to speak about, not about Yosef and his brothers, but the situation in Egypt. It says that in the first year, the hunger was so bad, people had nothing to eat, that they came to Yosef to buy food. And by the end of the first year, there was no cash available. So this is where text 1 picks up. Text number 1 on page 189. It says, Yosef collected all the money in the land because they had no more money, and then after that the money was depleted, and they said, give us food. She said, okay, give me your animals. So they put their livestock, and Joseph gave them in return for the horses and the livestock, that he gave them food. And then afterwards, the hunger was very, very bad, and they needed food, and then they sold the farmlands, and then actually, doesn't show here, but they actually sold themselves. That's how Pharaoh became control, not just over people, over the possessions. He became control over everybody. Now, so we see from here that Yosef amassed a tremendous amount of money, of cash in hand. The IRS wanted to audit him, right? Because think about it this way, right? Egypt was the superpower of the world at that time, which means they were the richest country of the world at that time. And then we know that Jacob and his family had to go down to buy food because the hunger wasn't just in Egypt, the hunger was in the Middle East. They mean money wasn't just coming in the Pharaoh's coffers from Egypt, it was coming in from all the surrounding countries. And what did Yosef do with that money? So it's a very interesting.
Invested it in Bitcoin.
Exactly. FTX, right? TX, exactly. Yeah, hopefully not, right? If you look at text number 2, the Gemara says something very interesting. What did he do with all this money? It says Yosef concealed 3 treasures in Egypt. The location of one was revealed to Korach, that's Moshe's cousin. The location of another one was revealed to Antoninus, the emperor of Rome. And Antoninus, the emperor of Rome, he was one of the Roman emperors that were very kind to the Jews. Actually, the Gemara tells us that him and Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi shared a close kinship one with the other. I mean, I don't want to tell the story behind it, but it's off the subject. But if you remind me later, I'll tell you the story. And the third one, he hid away for the messianic era. Okay. And we see in text number 3, it says Yosef collected all the gold and the silver, and it says that Yosef collected all the money, and he brought it to Pharaoh's house. The words Pharaoh's house imply a secret place. He didn't just bring it into the treasury, into his private place. So we know he buried. Tradition has it that he buried 3 such treasures. Okay. So why bury it? And what's the point of putting it away if you're not going to be here anymore, right? You keep, like those people. What's that story? Wasn't there a story? A woman who wanted to be buried in her car,
There's been a few people who've done that.
right? I think there's an old joke of a man who wanted to be buried with all his money. He was very, very wealthy, and he died. Everyone wanted to see what his wife was going to do. She came. She wasn't holding anything. They're waiting. She pulls out her checkbook. She writes a check. She puts it into the grave. He says, if he wants it, he can cash a check, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. So what's the point of burying it? All right. So before we go on, it's very important to understand and to know that, and to have in mind that the people in the Torah, they're not just people. It's true, the story happened. There was a Joseph, and there was a Pharaoh, and there was a Yaakov and Yehuda. These people all existed, obviously. But more than that, these people are templates. They represent something. And the Torah is not a storybook that happened. This story happens 3,500 years ago. More. No, yeah, about 3,500 years ago. Yeah, because the Torah was given 3,300 years ago. Yeah, so it's about 3,500 years ago. But it's not a storybook that happens then. It's a story. It's a lesson for us now. So who is Yosef now? Who is Yosef now? Because every person exists now. So for example, like a Haman, anti-Semite. It's very easy, right? We understand as always. But not only in the negative. There's a Yosef now. So Yosef is called the shepherd. What's the job of a shepherd? The job of a shepherd is to make sure that his flock is taken care of, fed, guarded. What did Yosef do for his family and for the entire region? He made sure they were taken care of. You see in text number 4 that King David writes, I think this is Psalm 80. We say this on Rosh Hashanah. It says, Rei Yisrael Hazino, O shepherd of Israel, listen, he who leads Joseph like flocks. That Yosef is called the shepherd, the leader. Okay? Number 1. That's point number 1. Okay, point number 2. In the Torah, we know there are no vowels. Right? I was practicing to read it. Torah, no vowels, huh? Torah has no vowels. Why did the Torah? One of the reasons why the Torah is written that way is to allow words to be read different ways, because words can have double meanings. How do you say money in Hebrew?
Geld?
That's Yiddish.
Oh, no.
I don't know. Alan, I mean? Kesef. You've heard that saying, the word before, kesef? No?
Geld, yes.
Geld, Yiddish. Yeah. Chanukah Geld, yeah. So the word in Hebrew it's kesef. Now the word kesef has the same root, etymological root, as yearning. It's the same word, just different vowels. Kesef is a segel, and one is with a cholam. So kesef, like we say in Psalm 23, Nichsefa v'gam kol nafshi, my soul yearns. Kesef means to yearn. All right, so we have Yosef, the shepherd, the one who takes care of everything. He gathered all the money. Okay, and he buried it. So he took instead of using it as money, he buried that yearning, that will, yearning for attachment. Here we go. Now let's get into Chassidus, okay? Because the point of Chassidus is to help us take the stories and lessons in the Torah and apply it in our life. Text 5a. You say here, money, a popular Kabbalistic idea is that money is a code for love. It's the same word. It's not on the screen. Okay, that's not a good slideshow. Here we go. The Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya. It says water is a reflection. You look in the water, you see your own reflection, right? And that's the way it is, face to face. The heart, Alter Rebbe quotes it, the heart is like water. The heart reflects. So Hashem, think of it like this. Hashem placed his infinite and powerful light to the side. He concealed his presence in order to create a world, in order that on that world there should be earthly beings like us, for us to do the mitzvahs. And so out of love for us, he put himself aside. So certainly, now on the other way, certainly, and thousands of times more so, a person ought to put everything aside, materially and spiritually, to abandon everything as to connect to God. The Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya that it's impossible, if someone's showing you love, to be angry at that person. If someone's showing you an emotion, you respond with that emotion. If I scream at you, you start shouting back. You walk away. But inside,
I have no idea why you're screaming at me. I'm not your kid.
especially if it's in another language. Right? Try driving in another country. They start screaming at you, and it seems upset.
You don't know. I'm driving on the correct side of the road.
Right.
It's everybody else.
Exactly.
On the wrong side.
One time I was driving in Toronto. I must have done something wrong. I don't know what it is. This guy pulled up along me by the red light, and he gave me a finger. So what did I do? I waved to him and smiled. So the green, so I took off. And they come back next to me, and the more he cursed me out, the more I waved and smiled. But when someone's showing you love, automatically you can't help it. You find yourself with feelings of love inside. So the Eibishter Hashem shows us love by giving us opportunity to do to do these mitzvahs. So the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya that we can react correspondingly. And like the student of the Baal Shem Tov, his name is Yaakov Yosef of Polnoi, and he says the word kesef, you see it over there, he spells it out. The Hebrew word kesef carries two translations. One is literal, money, very appropriate. We're talking about this while we're running a campaign, and the other is yearning, desire. So accordingly, in the book of Exodus, there's a commandment, which literally means that if a poor person comes for a loan, you have to give them the loan. It says, "Im kesef talve esan mi," when you will lend money to my people. Now the word talve, if you see here in Hebrew, if you look over here, that word the arrow is pointing to, if you're not present, you can't see it. It has a similar word as loive, as Levi. When Leah had her third son Levi, she called him Levi. Why? He says, "Ata yelove ishti elai." Now my husband will be connected to me because I bore him 3 sons. So the word Levi really means connection. So now we can read the verse like this. So accordingly, the verse will read, "Im kesef." When a Jew has kesef, when he has passion and he yearns, loive, to connect to God. That's what it means. Okay, so now what happens? What happens when a Jew wants to connect to God? What happens when a Jew is lacking that passion to connect to God? He knows up here, mentally understands he has to do the right thing, but he's missing the oomph. So what comes in? So what comes in is the shepherd. So now the fifth Chabad Rebbe, Abdei Ber Levavitch, explains this verse accordingly. Look at text number 8, page 194. We can now understand the verse. It says, "Roi Yisrael Hazina Noi Katzon Yosef," or shepherd of Israel, listen, he who leads Yosef like flocks. Shepherd of Israel that feeds the Jewish people with love and fear of Hashem. This then is what the verse says. This is what Yosef's job is. Because remember, there's a person, Yosef, who existed 3,500 years ago, who gave the family and all the region food, and then there is the Yosef present today, who's the leader of the generation, the Rebbe of the generation. And his job is to infuse the Jewish soul with an innate hidden love of God. This love is bestowed to every Jew from on high, unilaterally, and it's commensurate with the supernal level of Yosef. So now remember the question was, why did Yosef bury it away? What was Yosef burying away over here? So now according to Chassidus, now makes sense. It wasn't talking about burying away gold and silver. Yosef foresaw, remember, that Yosef was the only brother to experience exile. The other brothers never experienced exile. They lived in the land of Canaan, and then they came down to the land of Egypt, and Yosef took care of them. They never experienced any challenge, so to speak, to their service of God. They had it easy always. The one we look to, how does a Jew survive in exile, is Yosef, right? Yosef was the one that was sold into slavery. Yosef was the one that was abused, accused falsely, and then came out on top. So Yosef foresaw that there's going to be a time the Jews are going to be in exile. And the Jews are not going to be excited, whoop-de-doo, let's go serve Hashem. They're going to be tired and bruised and beat down, or just a Monday.
Yep.
Wake up, like for example, today we had a regular davening. Yesterday, with reading of the Torah and Hallel, it's beautiful. Today, I don't have to go to shul. I went to shul for 8 days. The day after Hanukkah, how do you get up to go to shul? So you have to tap in to an energy that's there. So Chassidus and Kabbalah explain that every Jew has a hidden love of Hashem. It's embedded inside of you, no matter what. And sometimes it stirs up to the surface without you realizing it. I read a story, and I can't vouch for the veracity or the authenticity of the story, but it's a good story, so who cares, right? But, I'm not running for office. I don't have to tell the truth. All right, that's not it.
Well, according to that Republican guy,
Oh, yeah.
you know he has to tell the truth.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Was he a congressman?
Right.
Yeah, representative.
So the story goes like this. I read the story. I mean, I'll share it with you. Story goes that there was a Jewish boy who lived in Hebron in the 20s, and he wasn't the best boy, and he befriended some other Arab teens over there, and we all know about the Hebron massacre in 1929. They walked into the yeshiva. I think they killed 50 people on a Shabbos, and they were walking around looking for Jews. And they walk in, and he was playing his cards or whatever with his Arab friends, and he said, "Any Jews here?" And they said, no, they were protecting him. But something inside of him, he walked outside, he said, no, I'm Jewish. And they killed him.
I never heard that story.
I read it recently. So that's why, I mean, when stories, whenever I hear a story like that come up, all of a sudden from a recent event, past 100 years. But regardless if it's true or not, it represents a very true point that a Jew has a Judaism spark embedded in him, and he can't. I'll tell you another story. This one I know is true. When the Germans were in Paris, and the first thing they did was they documented all the people living there. So they came to the Rebbe's house. The Rebbe lived in Paris at the time, and the Rebbe wasn't home. The Rebbetzin was home. Rebbe's wife. So they asked, "Are you? What are you? Jewish?" And Rebbetzin knew exactly what the Germans were. So she said, "We're Orthodox." Orthodox can mean a million things.
Mm-hmm.
And when the Rebbe came home, and he found out what the Rebbetzin did, he didn't want even for a moment the Gentiles to think that he was anything but a Yid. So he went down to the police station. He made sure they changed his mark to Jewish. Now, the reason why I didn't lead with that story is because you'll be like, of course, he's the Rebbe. But that idea is present in every Jew. So let's go. Now, let's go further with what the Rebbe Rashab says in text 6b, on page 195. And he says, due to the hardships and stress of exile, you have to make a living, and Hashem is hidden from plain view. Michael J. We're talking about the Beis HaMikdash. In the Beis HaMikdash, godliness was more visible, more experienced.
Yeah.
In exile, it's not experienced. As such, it happens that when a Jew is performing a mitzvah, he doesn't have any energy, and this is due to diminished capacity to properly contemplate on matters. I mean, this is the Rebbe Rashab talking in the 1900s. When you have problems with Russian peasants and pogroms and everything else, or even if you have peace and security and you want to daven properly, you want to pray or learn properly, you can't stop thinking about business or whatever it is. So as a result of being subjected to this bitter long exile, the Jewish people are going to completely fall away from God, distant and severed with increasingly diminished amounts of God's light. And eventually, the capacity to perceive God would be completely forgotten, to the extent that not even a trace of godly love will be left. So Hashem had mercy on his people, and he put in place Yosef. Let's go back to the original story. The brothers sold Yosef, and they did a terrible thing. But think about it. That Yosef needed to come down to Egypt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yosef needed to be there in order to interpret the dreams of the butler and baker. So the butler can tell Paro about how Yosef interpreted his dream. So Paro can ask Yosef, and Yosef can interpret Paro's dream. Yosef didn't just save his brothers from starvation. Yosef saved, I have no idea what the population is, but hundreds of thousands of people from starvation. Yosef had to be there.
Yeah.
So in the Parsha, and you'll see in text number 7, the brothers are all apologetic, but Yosef says, don't you see? Don't you see? And the Gemara learns from here that God puts in place the healing before he puts in place the illness. God put Yosef in Egypt in order that the solution would be present before the problem. And that's what he tells him. You see in verse number 8. Oh, so verse number 7. And God sent me here before you for a remnant of the land and to preserve it for you for a great deliverance. And he says to them something crazy. He says to them, you think you sent me here? No, you didn't send me here. Hashem sent me here. You think you sold me to slavery? I would have been down here regardless, even if we got along. I had to be here. So the Eibishter saw what's going to happen. And he sent, so now on the spiritual side, right, on the Hasidic side, he sent Yosef before to embed in every Jew. That means even before a Jew comes into this world, the neshama comes into the body, and even before a person goes through life, with everything that happens, like they say in Yiddish, everyone has their pekel. You know what that means?
Peckle?
Yeah, pekel is Yiddish for a package. Everyone has their story. No one goes through life. Now, a baby is born, the body's all smooth and perfect. No one's buried that way. Everyone has scars. Physical scars, emotional scars. Everybody. No one goes through perfect. So even before all that, Hashem put in place, this is what it means, Yosef, the shepherd, put in place this embedded love, this embedded connection that every Jew has. And our job, when everything fails, is to dig deep and access that hidden love. This is what the Rebbe Rashab says in text number 8. This is then what Yosef is saying. Is it to preserve life that God sent me before you. This supernal light of love that is buried within the soul of every Yid in every generation is a lifesaver and a refuge throughout the long exile. It ensures that the love of Hashem will never be forgotten from the hearts. The Jewish people will never be sapped of their emotional energy to perceive God. This is credit to the innate hidden love, godly love that is sourced in the loftiest level of God himself. That means just like God is unextinguishable and he was, he is, and will always be, so too the connection between a Jew and Hashem, it has the same supernatural, unlimited by time connection. Sorry. This love is called hidden, deep in the potential of every Jew. It's bestowed from on high. It comes suddenly without any preparation. It transcends reason, and it only needs to be teased out of potential to practice. And we see throughout history, there are many stories, both recent and going back even further, that there were Jews who were willing to give up their life, or there were Jews who expressed connection to Judaism when they didn't really make sense for them to do that. Make sense for them to do so. Why? Because that the Yiddish and the Shema burn inside of it. Okay. Before we go on to the next section, any questions? Yay, nay? No? Make sense? Alan, everything makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So now you might think, so I don't gotta do anything, right? I got this embedded innate love. I'm good. Right? I hit the jackpot lottery. My last name is Buffett. Right? I'm getting money no matter what. Even though I think he gave away all his money, or he set it aside. I don't know. Whatever.
He said he will give away all of his money.
No, all right,
Yeah.
whatever. Or Gates, or Musk, whatever. All right. So the answer is like this. That's not the way it is. So let's get into gardening, shall we?
Sure.
Planting. It's something I don't know.
I'm terrible at it.
Well, I don't know. I go to the store and I buy vegetables. Like where do peppers come from? The store.
Yeah. That's what most kids think too.
Or a pepper tree, right? Right.
Exactly.
I don't know. All right. So the Zohar writes like this. The Zohar writes. We'll learn the Zohar, but then we'll explain it. This is text number 9. So this is the light planted by Hashem in the Garden of Eden by the way of the righteous Joseph. He is the gardener who takes that light and plants it as a true plant during exile. The gardener does not go into the garden. What does this all mean? The Alter Rebbe explains in text 10a. It says like this: all this love planting is performed by Yosef, who's the righteous gardener. That means he is the one that collected the money. He collected the yearning, and he embedded it in the heart of every single Jew. So when it comes to planting, when it comes to your garden, there are two different types of plants. I don't know if you plant at all, but two different types of plants.
Annuals and perennials.
By the way, we put in landscaping over here. People sent me messages. Rabbi, good choice in the plant. I had no idea what they were talking about. Like the gardener told me, I'll put in something nice. All right, whatever you do, you're the gardener. People are like, Rabbi, good choice. I'm like, okay, yeah.
Yeah, crotons are very,
Yeah,
very
they
hardy plants.
For this climate.
Whatever you say. But I come from New York. I had my grass in my front of my house was like a 2x6.
Yeah.
Right. Literally, by the way.
I know. I've walked through Crown Heights. I've seen the front yards. They're 2x6.
So that there are two types of plants. There's the ones you plant, and they grow as a result of you planting them. And then there's things that grow on its own, weeds, or let's say you planted last year, but then the seed didn't catch them. Whatever they catch on, you know the old joke. This elderly man had a flower. Like to plant his own vegetables, his own flowers. He was getting older and he couldn't do it anymore. Not to till and to overturn. He sent his son a letter. He said, "Dear Paul," he said, I love my hobby to plant, and I hope it won't be too much of a bother. Could you go help maybe your old father come over and help me plant, help me shovel the dirt in the garden?" So Paul sends back a message. He says, "Dad, don't plant anything in the garden. That's where all the bodies are buried." A few days later, the FBI descends, and they're digging, no plants, they go home. 2 days later, another letter comes from Paul, says, "Sorry, Dad, I couldn't come myself, but this was the best I can do under the circumstances." Right? So there are two types. There's two types of love. There are two types of love. And there are two types of planting. There's the planting where you work hard, right? You plant the wheat, or you plant the flower, you plant the cucumbers, and because of that, there's what comes out as a result of your planting. Then there's a weed, or could be a some seed left over. Well, for example, in Israel, last year was Shemitah. 7th year you can't harvest. Does that mean nothing grew?
Nope.
I'm sure things grew because of the seeds from other years, right? Mm-hmm. So those, I don't know what you call them. In Hebrew, there's a word for it. Not weed, but leftover plants or whatever. Late sprouters. So the Rebbe is going to draw a parallel to two types of love. There's the love we work on based on our learning and our contemplation. And then there's the love that's just there on its own. And this is the Rebbe says in text 10b. He says, this is in Yiddish for Alan. I know you're working on your Yiddish with the guilt over there. Generally speaking, there are two types of love of Hashem. Numero uno. Love is born out of cognitive process, namely thinking about God's greatness, learning, understanding, and internalizing. And then there's two, a hidden love that every Jew possesses by the fact that they have a godly soul, and everything by nature is attracted to its source. So this godly soul is attracted to its source, which is God, but with enough thought, it's hidden, but with enough thought, it can be roused from its slumber to the conscious experience. And like I said before, the most, what's the word I'm looking for? The most shocking arousal can be when a Jew is faced with death or conversion, idolatry, that arouses that spark from its slumber, and a Jew will choose martyrdom rather than idolatry. And the Rebbe continues. The difference between 10c, these two types of love is it similar, mirrors the two types of growth. So you have number one, the crop that grows as a result of human effort. Then the crops that grow on their own, not from planting, but previous planting, like I said about Shemitah. And so it is with the two types of love. Love that is developed through the cognitive process, and by contrast, the hidden love is akin to the crops that prop up on their own from previous planting, for the love was indeed planted at so long ago. So the reason why I didn't want to use the word weed, because it seems like it comes up on its own or it's annoying. Rebbe make sure to point out that it grew on its own, not because it just grew on its own, because someone took the effort a long time ago to make sure that was embedded within you. So it means Yosef, our forefathers, and the truth is we all stand on the shoulders of our parents and ancestors that came before us. That's why we're sitting here in the shul and we're learning Torah, because all the generations before us, and they made sure. But who was the one guy that made sure that every single Jew would have that Jewish spark? Who was to make sure that a Jew could always go to that reservoir, his connection to Judaism? It's Yosef. Yosef is the man. He's the one to make sure that we had the planting for the plant, the growth for exile. Text 10d, that it says. This planting of hidden love in every Jew is accomplished by our righteous Yosef. He realized, by the way, that Yosef is always called Yosef HaTzadik, the righteous Yosef. Why? Because he's the one that manages to remain upright, observant, and doing what he's supposed to, even in exile. None of our biblical characters had that title. We have Moshe, our teacher, Avram, our father, right? Sarah, our mother, this man, the prophet, Shmuel HaNavi. Sure, no one has the title Tzaddik. Just to show you what in high esteem Yosef is held. Because again, if you think about it, I'm not trying to knock any of the biblical characters, God forbid. But Avram, Yitzchak, it's like Yitzchak, for example. Yitzchak lived a certain life. He stayed in Israel, and he had his service. But no one was challenged like Yosef. Nobody. Yaakov was challenged, but not like Yosef. No one was challenged like Yosef. Out of all the biblical characters, no one's challenged like Yosef. I mean, think about what he went through. His mother died when he was 9. His brother sold him into slavery when he was 17. Then at 18, he's accused of rape and thrown into prison for a crime he didn't commit. And only then at 30, he has every right to turn his back on his family. And at 30, he becomes second to the king. Many times with money and power. I don't need God and anything else. But and when he meets his brothers, as we see in this week's parsha, he's not resentful. He's not waiting for an apology. Not only that, he sort of apologizes to them. Because I didn't see it, you didn't see it. He's making them, instead of them apologizing to him, he's making them feel better. Yosef is, although he's the most powerful person in the world, second to Paro at that time. Again, I don't like using the concept of a vice president, because in our day, vice presidents didn't do anything. Jackie Mason has a joke. What's the vice president's job? Before he goes to play golf, he calls the president. How you feeling today? Good? All right. No cold, nothing. But Yosef, Paro was ruler. Yosef managed the whole estate. He managed everything. And yet, he doesn't, there's no compromise on his character, morality, ethics is what he has to do. That's why Yosef is held in such high standard. Anyway, going back to what we were saying before. So Yosef is the one that plants it for every Jew in exile. When this hidden love expresses itself in the life of every Jew, it is direct outgrowth of Yosef's efforts. It may feel like it comes out of nowhere. All of a sudden, I feel like I want to do something holy. I want to go to shul. But in truth, this is coming from Zohar. Now, Yosef planted a treasure. That treasure is going to go on for a long time. So, in the exile. And the exile has been going on for a long time. So what's the difference between exile times and Mashiach times? In exile time, the Jew has to sort of reach deep when things aren't going well in the service of God. Messianic times is when everyone's going to have that energy. So sometimes kids get they don't like the concept of Messianic times. Because they say Messianic times, you mean I'm not going to be able to play sports, I'm not going to like candy, I'm not going to like donuts. So tell them I won't be able to play. You won't be able to play. There'll still be baseball and soccer and football, whatever it is. I mean, the Red Sox won't be around because God's going to remove all impurities from the world. But other than that, no. But the idea is that your focus, a person's focus, will be different. In Messianic times, Mashiach comes, a Jew is going to be motivated to serve Hashem on a conscious level. Until that time comes, may come very soon. We have to keep in mind that the good news is we could always go back to that storage. Like our parents put trust fund, and every once in a while we need to tap into savings. When our spiritual economy is down, we tap into our 401k that Yosef planted for us. And this is what the Rebbe says in text number 11. I'll end up with a story. The way to actually experience this type of love is through deep thought. And this is a problem for people that say, "Oh, I'm a Jew at heart. I don't really have to do anything." It's not good enough. It's true, but it's not good enough. A person has to try to bring the Judaism out. And how do you do that? You do that through action, and you do that through expressing the Judaism. You think to yourself, what does it mean to be a Jew? I don't know if you saw the whole controversy today. You saw the controversy today? Google issued an apology. You saw that?
Which controversy?
So there's a controversy today. I got it from some people that I never hear from on WhatsApp. That I actually tried it this morning. That you put in Jew into Google with a small j, lowercase j, came up as offensive. Mean to be miserly, to be cheap. I'll show you. I have a picture of it. It was pretty bad. It was going around, and Google changed it, and they issued an apology. But we should think about, to be deep in thought, the Rebbe says, to understand what it means to be Jewish, and to understand what our role is in this world. And all these biblical stories are great. But the question is, how do you act today? And for that, you need to learn Chassidus. Chassidus, like we saw today, takes a story from the Torah. It's a very nice story. Yosef didn't take revenge, and that's a nice story. But that's not the story. Because how often are people doing something bad to you?
Well, I don't know. I drive on the highway every day, so.
How many birdies do you see on a daily, right?
It's the people who try to sideswipe you, the people who pull in front of you.
Right, exactly.
Without signaling.
Signaling. What's signaling? So if you bring that job when we do that, when we bring our Judaism from a hidden state to a revealed state, that helps us to bring out the biggest secret of all, the Rebbe said, which is Mashiach. I'm going to end off with a true story. I shouldn't say that because then you start thinking.
Right.
Exactly.
What is on Shabbos? Those are all fake stories.
Right. No, the reason why I preface it like that is because sometimes I tell a story and it's so fantastical you think, okay, there's no way.
That's really a joke.
Which
The
one?
kid comes home.
Right, exactly.
And he brought out this AK-47 and he shot all these guys. And everything is, is that what it? If I told you what really, you wouldn't believe it.
Right. Story. The joke he's talking about is the kid comes home from Hebrew school.
Yeah.
His mother asks him, "What did you learn today?" He says, "I learned that there were a bunch of Jewish POWs in Egypt. And Moses led a whole sniper team 5, SEAL team 5, and then they came to the water and they built a bridge and then they demobilized the Egyptians." And the mother, whoa. That's the way the story teacher told you. Says, "I told you the way the teacher said, you'll never believe it, right?" So here goes the story. I think this story has a very powerful impact. I believe actually I shared the story once with you guys, maybe on a Shabbos or high holidays. So this story takes place in Belgium. A guy shows up. In World War II, there was these two people in a camp, and one of them was from Switzerland or I forgot, or German. I forgot where he was originally from. He tells his friend, he said, "Listen here, so I have a lot of money in a Swiss account, millions of marks or whatever it is. Very wealthy man, and I don't know if I'm going to survive. I trust you, you're a rabbi, you're a good person. So if I don't survive, he gives him the account number, and I guess the pin, the cat, whatever it is. So if I don't survive after the war, please give this to my living relative. The guy did die. The rabbi survived the war, and he had it with him, and he became a rabbi in Belgium. One day, a guy comes in and he's a schnar. You know what a schnar is? Schnar is a beggar, a borrower. He comes into the shul and he's asking for money. So the rabbi, being a nice guy, doesn't just throw him money. He says, "How you doing, Rabbi Yid? What's your name?" He starts talking to him, and the guy's Meshuggah, right? The guy is, you're thinking, you're tapping into the reservoir all the Yiddish words you know. Do me a favor. Wait till I finish recording and get to the curse words, okay? So the guy's name rings a bell. So he starts asking him, your father, your this, your mother. He asks him, you're tired. Let me get a place for you. He didn't want to tell him anything. Let me get a place for you to stay, before you travel on. This guy would travel from community to community to collect money. He does some research, and it's this guy's son. So he calls him in. The guy's dressed in tattered clothing. The guy's a real beggar, a homeless guy, like I was telling you before. He sits him down and says, "Listen here, let me tell you something. You're not a poor man. You're really a very, very rich man." Because the guy says, "Please don't play with me." He says, No, I'm not joking. I'm telling you the truth. And he tells him the story how his father gave him the account number, and he shows him the paper. He says, "This is the account number." He says, go to Zurich, whatever it is, and go to the bank and get. He says he gave him money to buy some new clothing and to a train ticket. And the guy was going around for years collecting money, and he thought he was a poor person. In the meantime, this whole period, he was really a very wealthy person. I think the story connects very well, because sometimes a Jew thinks that we're poor, we have no value. Sometimes you devalue your mitzvah. What's the point if I say Shema over it? Put on the tefillin. I choose the kosher sandwich over it's not kosher, or I choose to keep Shabbos a little better. We don't value ourselves and our actions. And based on what we're saying today, that we have a reservoir, we're actually very wealthy, and what we got to do is we got to tap into that reservoir to show that that bank account that Yosef started, that 401k, that trust fund that's every once in a while you see these stories in the news. And people find these bonds from like whatever it was $20, and now it's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's the way a Yid has to look at it. You always have to look at yourself, that you're part of a chain. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. We're part of that. I mean, that's a very lengthy heritage. And when you look at, you're part of that massive, beautiful painting, you don't want to take yourself out. You want to be part of that. And that's how you approach and do a mitzvah. All right, key points. Page 205. Torah relates, the stories related in the Torah are not just stories. They are templates, the eternal impact. Money, again, kesef and kaisef, without vowels. Money represent love and desire in Kabbalah. Yosef is considered the quintessential Jewish shepherd. He's the one that made sure we're taken care of. And as a shepherd, he was concerned about religious fatigue later in exile. So he buried in the DNA of every single Jew this love, this yearning for Judaism, for God, and that's why he's called the gardener. And more specifically, he planted two types of love: one that requires effort, and that's really the best one. But then there's the hidden love that's embedded in every single Jew. And let's continue. And when we graduate to the first love, when Mashiach comes, but it's attainable now by learning Torah. And when we experience religious fatigue, we have to tap in to that 401k, the trust fund, or that reserve that Yosef planted for us, Yosef and our parents and grandparents. Good stuff. Any questions? Yay, nay? All right, so thank you for joining us. And next week, I think next week we'll do it again on Tuesday. Tuesday is a fast day.